Good afternoon, everybody. Barry McGuire here for Barry McGuire's Creative Real Estate Education Group. This is the Monday main event. Normally, the Divine Donna does Monday main event, but I'm in today. We're going to have a chat with Gary Ma about maybe the most interesting agreement for sale that I've ever been involved in. This is a story that will hit all the high spots. It's firstly an agreement for sale that everybody likes to hear about. It involves a multifamily building. It takes place over a number of years. There are lots of challenges to overcome. It's certainly a win-win. It's a first AFS, and those are always interesting. This is really an interesting first one to dive into because it's more complicated than more normal first ones. And joining us today to tell us the story is Gary Ma. Gary has kindly agreed to show up and tell us about his agreement for sale, and he's given us a whole bunch of points to talk about. So we're going to welcome Gary Ma, and of course, Wayne Hillier will be joining in as well as we move along. Hey, Gary, welcome to Monday Main Event.
Hey, you're welcome. I'm really excited to be here, actually. So,
hey there.
Hey, Wayne. How are you?
Great. I'm excited to hear about this one.
Yeah. This is going to be good. This is going to be really good. So, Gary, I love hearing about people's background. It's fine for to come on and tell the story, but give us some background. Who is Gary Ma? When did he get started in real estate? How long has he been doing real estate?
Yeah.
Let's start out with a bit of that before we get into the story. So tell us about you.
Yeah. So my background is actually in structural engineering, and we started off in real estate back in 1991 when we first moved to Yellowknife. So that was 30 years ago when we bought our first property. And from there, we moved back to Edmonton. And then, we were dabbling in real estate along the way. We ended up owning the real estate in Yellowknife and then eventually renting it out. And then we bought some other properties over the past, 15 years. But it wasn't until about 10 years ago where a friend told me to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that was just, life-changing. So I've been on this journey since then. Creating my own life through Rich Dad Poor Dad ideas, and I've been focusing on real estate for the past between 2010 and 2015. I was juggling both real estate and engineering, so it was a lot of time doing both. So yeah, it was quite involved, and then the market turned in terms of oil. And that affected a lot of engineering jobs. And then, I was more or less out of engineering. So I started focusing on real estate. But then there was a point where I got stuck and I needed some help. And I came across some coaches that really helped me work through some of my areas where I was stuck. And through that past 5 years, I've just grown tremendously through real estate, acquisitions and through personal growth. So yeah, that's who I am. I guess also in terms of my family, I'm married. I've been married for 30 some years. We have 3 kids, all boys. One of them's 20, and we have a set of twins that are 12. So actually, I've just gotten them into buying some real estate as well. We're buying a 6-plex out in Saskatchewan altogether. So,
yeah. What a great way to kind of finish the Who is Gary Ma story. That is so exciting. Wow, that's so exciting, and fun that your boys are interested as well, because it's great to have family involved if you can, and it's also heartwarming. You're now doing it. You're loving it. You're successful at it, and it's just better if the rest of the family doesn't see it as a way that dad can pay the bills.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's really passing on the knowledge so that they can do it on their own if they want to in the future. And then just learning that whole, like, they don't have to necessarily have a job if they don't want to.
No.
And just building up their net worth and income and that. So
Yeah, I do like that. I do like that. Well, with that introduction, let's talk about the agreement for sale. That's the subject of today's Monday main event. And let's start out with, it's kind of interesting. We're starting out in August of 2017 when Chris Davies, who was on our show last week, third generation investor, called you about a 24 unit building in Swan Hills. So let's start with that. That's actually 3 years ago. Wow. 18, 19, 20,
three and
over
a half
3
years.
years.
Yeah, three and a half years now.
3.5 years. So he calls you about a multifamily. Were you looking for multis at the time? So this was an interesting call?
Yeah, it was. Like, I had been looking for multis. I had done a lot of coursework on multis at that time. So I knew how to analyze it. I knew what to do on it. At that time, I didn't really know anything about Swan Hills, and it just didn't seem like it was the right project to look at for me. And so I just kind of passed on it, like Swan Hills, what I know about Swan Hills, it's so far away, at that time. And then it wasn't.
Where is Swan Hills? Swan Hills is north of Edmonton. How far north?
Well, it's about 2.5 hours drive. Normally I go through Barhead. You can go through Westlock. So it's sort of northwest from Edmonton, about 2.5 hours drive. It's an all paved road, so you can drive there through the winter and everything will be is good. So.
And how big is Swan Hills, and why would anybody want to be in Swan Hills? So I don't think it's a very big town, is it?
No, it's about 1,200 people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's probably shrunk a bit with the economy shrinking as well. So they have the hazardous waste treatment center there, and then a lot of oil and gas type related work. They also have a hospital in Swan Hills, and they've got pretty good recreational facilities. They've got a big arena. They've got a seniors complex. There's a RCMP station there. So, I mean, it's pretty metropolitan for its size.
It's not bad for such a small centers. Such a long way from Edmonton. So tell us about what's the original intelligence on the multi? What was on offer and what was it costing? And
yeah, so I mean, it was a 24 unit building. It was listed for $649,000 at the time. I kind of ran the numbers initially, and the numbers didn't really make sense at that time. So and I really didn't know Swan Hills. So like back in August 2017, I just kind of pushed it aside, really, more or less. Sure. Yeah, really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So there it is in August 2017. Something else happened. How did you get back? How did you get back at this potential mulch?
Yeah. So late in 2018 in April, Chris Davies contacted me and said, "Hey, the seller really wants to sell. She lowered her price to $300,000, and and I kind of looked at it.
49 to 300. Holy crap!
To 300. So it's quite a big drop. Like huge. Exactly right. And even at that time, I thought, I still didn't know what Swan Hills was about. So it was still pretty iffy. And it wasn't until I started really clarifying my goals, which my real estate and mindset coaches really helped me with. And once I had that clarified, it was actually a very easy decision to say, hey, this Swan Hills building could really take me a lot closer to my goals. So, I mean, it was a very easy decision to say yes to it without knowing a lot of stuff about Swan Hills and the building and, everything else around it. So, I started getting information about the town, what the building was like, getting some pictures and, just getting comfortable with that whole process of buying type of thing. And then later on, probably about a month later, we basically just struck up a deal and said, okay, the lady who's selling it needed to sell because she was paying a lot of the expenses for the building through her pension, which I later found out, which was really bleeding her dry. Which is, can you imagine, elderly lady having to pay pretty significant expenses for a building and not being able to really live.
So how is it that this elderly lady has this building? That doesn't sound like.
Yeah, I mean the lady,
Yeah.
like she actually owned the building with her husband for the previous 18 years, and her husband had passed away about 3 years before I bought it. And so she was kind of managing it. Like, she lives in Edmonton and she was managing it from here with a property manager in Swan Hills. And it was sort of a combination of the economy and the property managers not being able to keep the building full. So, I mean, there are some buildings actually in Swan Hills that are mothballed, winterized, and just shut down right now. So, I mean, for this particular building, she ended up, I think, having just two paying tenants out of 24. So can you imagine? Yeah, exactly, right?
Hope
Two
that was a good
tenants.
pension.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
literally, the building was sucking her dry. It was bleeding. I mean, like, imagine the huge expenses for heating, the water, the electricity, for all of that that she had to pay, and there was no income supporting that. Yeah.
That's I mean, no, she's in desperate circumstances. Well, desperate. I mean, what do you even do? I mean, we always say, if you can help somebody to fix their problem, and without, you taking over a building, if there's a better way to do it. But I'm guessing she tried everything she could possibly try. Consider she's elderly and living in Edmonton. She was probably out of potential solutions.
Yeah, pretty much, I would say. And I think the lucky thing for her was that she had Chris as an agent, and I was able to help her. I purchased the building through an agreement for sale, where I basically took over all of the expenses and took over the building, took over the management of the expenses to stop the bleeding for her. And that was huge, I would say. And I think from that standpoint, stopping the bleeding was a huge win for her. I didn't really know that like, her husband had died 3 years before. I only found that out through my due diligence period when we were building our relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm gonna stop there for a moment. The redoubtable Chris Davies, who was on last week, has here he is.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, it's good.
Chris.
Yeah, it's funny because you never get to hear the second half of this. As a realtor, they close, and sometimes you hear what happens. And Gary and I have talked some, but it's it's brilliant. And I was just thinking about, like, the fact that you didn't know, like, as a realtor, whenever we double deals, especially when we're trying to solve a problem with something like an AFS, there's only so much about the problem I can say, because confidentiality prevents us from saying some things. So you don't find out till later all the rest of it. But it was a situation where, like, in retrospect, NAFS was literally the perfect thing. And Gary walked up she got 10 grand, I got 10 grand, and Gary took over everything else. And so she just walked away, and she was just happy as a clam.
Well, so Chris, now, I mean, so this purchase proceeded by way of AFS.
Yeah.
And so how did you, I mean, at that time, how did you know about AFS? I mean, I might know the answer to that, but tell other people how it is that you saw that as a solution to the problem.
Absolutely. Well, and the fun thing is that, I mean, I don't know when, I want to say I spoke at one of your workshops in like 2013, something like that, ages ago. And so we have this terrific network of people that, you know, people are looking for creative problem-solving tools. And, you know, we were trying to sell it based on math as the economy was sliding, and eventually came out at a number for her, which is like the debt plus whatever. And we thought about doing it as an assumption. One of the things when we got into the loan is that loan was, it was not actually a mortgage, it was a term loan. Remember, Gary, it
was more of a business loan.
Yeah. It was a revolving, callable at any time. There was an amount of risk there that have put some people off. But we had maybe a panel at one of the workshops or something, or just talking to other people, the way of pitching an agreement for sale, which is like, I'm going to give you 10 grand and take over everything else, and you don't have to worry anymore. And I think I used that line on her once to be like, here's how we can do this. Someone's going to write you a small check and take over everything else. And for a seller, especially a little old lady from the Caribbean, for her, a lot of the rest of it was about some personal trust, because we introduced you guys in person before the deal. Like once the deal was pending, right? You even went over to her house to pick up.
Yeah. Like I think I grabbed some of the due diligence documents and stuff like that. So we met. Yeah. So it was good.
And I still have pieces of it around here. My husband was an old school bookkeeper from before computers. And so all the records for the building are on 14 column hand entered, double entry bookkeeping. Like it is just massive. But for her, it was like personal trust was huge. Like Gary being able to go over, and I'm sure she fed you lemonade and talked your ear off for an hour to get 2 pieces of paper. Yeah, it was like, we're going to give you 10 grand for your legal expenses and a little bit of walking around money, and he's going to take over everything. And 2 years from now or whatever, they'll pay you out, or you'll renew. Like,
exactly.
So folks, if you're listening to this, you just put yourselves in the shoes of this elderly lady who used to run a building with her husband. I kind of think maybe her husband did most of the running of the building, and he passes away. The economy's in a bit of a tailspin. She can't sell conventionally. She's getting no help from any other conventional thinking realtors, and she is getting crushed by the decreasing number of tenants to the point where she's supporting the building with her pension. And when Chris comes along, when Gary come along, he is really probably at the end of her mental and her fiscal rope. So when you run into situations like this, if you show up and can present a solution, and if you can exhibit and engender the trust that people need to do these things. I know Wayne loves to talk about building trust as one of his very important success factors in his real estate business. So here's a classic application of the Hilliard Trust Principle. Call it that.
I'm writing that one down.
The Hilliard Trust Principle. So that's the situation that we find here on a property that was listed at $649,000. A year later, it's dropped to $300,000 because that, in the face of almost no tenants, And then in the end, Gary, what was the purchase price? She wanted now 300,000. What did you buy it for?
Yeah, I ended up buying it for 270,000. So just an amazing deal.
270,000. And so if we divide that by 24, well, how much is that per door?
Just 11,250 a door. Just amazing.
Wow.
I have my pen. I will add that, you know, as much as it, if he, you know, you bought it for the debt plus 20 grand. And
Yeah.
that is the solution to her problem. What did she want? I want the problem to go away. I want a little bit of walking around money, and I want Chris to get paid. But sometimes I get people that walk into that situation and they find out how desperate the little old lady really is, and they go further and they're out for blood. So Gary got a great deal. Could he have found a way to push her even farther? I don't know, maybe. But there's probably a special place in hell for people that do that to little old grandmas. And you know, Gary was brilliant through the whole process.
Yeah, it's. I'll tell you, folks, this is a thread that runs through everything that we do. Every time, I'm telling you that one of our students has a big success, as they say. They've played for win-win, and they've taken and solved somebody's problem where there was room to beat somebody up, where you could have done something else, where they're so desperate you could have really taken advantage, and they don't. And then we've had any number of sellers when you go, so why did you actually pick me? I mean, there probably was lots of competition. And when these deals show up, there is often lots of competition. Maybe there wasn't in this deal, but there often is. And those sellers say, because you weren't trying to take advantage of me, because I could tell you were an honest person, because I really believe you were trying to help me. And I'm just saying, I know I'm a broken record on this, but I'm saying that our biggest successes have come where the perception of you as a buyer has been as a problem-solving, helping, non-advantage-taking person. So just tuck that away, keep it in mind, and it will serve you well. All right, back to this wonderful story. Now, let's talk a little bit about the financing that was there. So, as you said, she didn't have a conventional loan; she had a business loan that was due on demand. So it's not a plain vanilla mortgage. It's not even a mortgage with an underlying loan agreement as a primary security and a mortgage as collateral security. It's a business loan agreement that the bank could call at any time. And so were we nervous about you essentially taking over that loan? Because I think, as is normal, was the bank aware of you, Gary? I don't recall that they were, but they might have been. They're often not in an agreement for sale, as we all know. But in this case, did they know about you, and did they know about her and the trouble she was having?
Yeah, well, she knew about me, and like actually, the seller and I went to the bank to talk about this loan and see how we could arrange payment of it. And she said that the only way that we could make it work is that if I deposit money into the seller's account every month. Like I couldn't do it electronically or anything like that. I have to physically deposit this check into her account every month. So I mean, that's what we ended up. I'm still doing. So the bank was not very flexible or helpful, I would say, in terms of being able to really do anything with the loan or mortgage, or even set up an account in my name to make those payments. So yeah.
The big but is that the bank didn't say, what are you doing? This is crazy. We can't allow this. If you do one darn thing like that, we're going to yank the loan and you'll be out on the street. And I mean, that is their right to say that. I mean, they don't have to cooperate with you at all.
So actually, I think what saved the discussion with the bank was that what I told them was that I was taking it over as a property manager.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So I was managing the property on behalf of the seller.
Which you were doing. In fact.
Yes.
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 We're doing. So, folks, lenders fit into these things, and it's the rare agreement for sale where you get the blessing of the bank. But the reason that these work is because what you're doing is, from the bank's perspective, everything still looks the same for them. That the payments are still coming from where they're supposed to come, taxes are getting paid, insurance is in order. As far as they're concerned, there might be a different operator, but the loan is still the same. So that is how it went with the bank. And so now, where are we in timing? Are we in 2018 roughly?
Yeah. So we're in 2018, and I'm starting to do my due diligence on it, and because this is the first time I'm actually buying a multifamily building, I didn't know what to really look for, and so I actually, well, Chris offered to get his father involved, who actually ran multifamily buildings as a property manager. So him and I went up there to have a look at the building, to make sure that the building was sound as an apartment building, to make sure there were no showstoppers and that. So that was huge. That was a huge step and relief to know that, okay, the building was a good building. There were no structural cracks, nothing really significant. There was still a lot of stuff that needed to get fixed and updated, but there were no showstoppers, I would say, like anything really expensive that would make this deal die.
Okay. So that's a big chunk of the diligence.
Oh yeah, huge. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so you accumulated enough diligence to enable you to make a buying decision.
Yeah, and then like part of the due diligence was trying to figure out, well, how much do I want to spend on renovations and things like that? Who's going to go up to Swan Hills to renovate? There's not a whole lot of contractors up there that want to go up from even Edmonton. But through my network, I was able to actually find a guy who, we drove up, had a look at it, and said, okay, well, what do you think? Can you do a renovation on it? He said, yeah. Like he actually typically works in Calgary. He lives in Edmonton, and he was going to do this work in Swan Hills. So I mean, it was it was amazing.
Yeah. It's a faster drive. It's 3 hours to Calgary and only 2.5 hours to Swan Hills.
Yeah,
so he's really expanding his reach in the province.
Yeah, exactly, right. So like there was a whole bunch of things that I didn't know when I first started, but they just came together as I was going forward on it.
Now, in order to close that building, I remember that the seller needed her own legal representation. Doing agreements for sale is always a little tougher because most lawyers don't know very much about it. Even in Alberta, that's one of the downsides of AFS is you need lawyers on both sides who know. I think she went through at least one lawyer, didn't she, before she found one who would do the job?
Yeah, I know she went through at least one, maybe even two.
Yeah.
My memory's failing me on that, but I think it was maybe even two, and then she landed on a third that I think Chris maybe helped her find somebody that was familiar with AFS.
Yeah, I think I had to do a fair amount of hand-holding on that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So eventually, but I got possession in September. I think it was just after the long weekend. I think we were planning to have possession, I think originally like August, beginning of August, but then with all the lawyers and stuff like that, we didn't get possession till beginning of September, just after the Labor Day.
Okay.
So.
All right, so we're in September of 2018. You're getting possession. It's always when you get possession, you have to do that setup. You got to organize those utility bills are paid and the taxes are paid, and you talked about actually making her payment to the bank. And so now, did you start renovating right away there in September?
Well, yeah, we were actually planning to start renovations in October, and I don't know if you remember, but that particular year we got snow very early in September, and it never went away until spring. And yeah, so like what I was concerned about was that the boiler system wasn't working, and we were going to freeze the building, and then it'd be a whole catastrophe, right? So so I had to get somebody up there, like when it was snowing, and to get a contractor up there, get the boiler going, and make sure there was heat in the building so it wouldn't freeze. And like I only had 2 tenants in there, so
you shouldn't have been using that much heat then, really.
Chris, it's funny. It was a new boiler, right? It was they had upgraded. She had dumped, for reasons I don't understand, she had dumped a whole bunch of money into a new boiler. It was kind of okay when we looked at it, but we didn't know for sure because it wasn't the heating season. And I remember we had conversations to be like, how do you renovate this building and get return quickly? And we talked about like, well, maybe we like lock off and winterize the main floor, shut down all the lines and clean it out. And it's not really doable. But I remember we had that conversation about like, how do we minimize the amount of bleed in this building and protect all the heating lines in the winter?
Wow. Yeah. So I mean, I was really pushing the contractor to get somebody up there, at the beginning of October, because of the snow and the cold and everything like that. So we eventually got somebody up there, and like we replaced all the zone valves, we replaced all the thermostats, we cleaned out, the boiler system. I mean, it was pretty much a mess, and we started to get heat in the building. So I mean, that helped stabilize some stuff. At least it protected the building. So we eventually got that, and then from there we were able to then start the renovations. And what we did was we actually started on the 3rd floor, just in case things started leaking. They could leak down into unrenovated suites. So we started on the 3rd floor, but we also had to move those 2 tenants that were on the 3rd floor into a 2nd floor suites, which they were okay with that. But like lots of coordination and things like that.
Well, it's actually, I mean, it's kind of funny to hear you say it, but it's smart. If you're gonna possibly have leaks, let's have that water going into unrenovated suites and not ruining the ones you've just finished.
Yeah, exactly.
Gary, I gotta ask, how many times did you almost quit and just say, screw this, I'm done?
Oh, probably hundreds of times. Like I mean, as we talk about this, I mean, there were so many times that I thought, oh, what am I doing? Like, holy cow, what did I get myself into? Type of thing. The expenses were going up, money is flying out the door, and I don't see any returns yet.
Yeah.
You're nowhere near a return. So
no.
So how did those renovations go? How was your contractor? How was it to get the renovations?
Yeah. So I mean, we started renovations in October. We started off with a really big bang in terms of he brought a big crew in, and he started demolishing the 3rd floor, and started and wanted to put things back together. And I think he started off he had too big of a crew trying to do everything at once. So he ended up spending a lot of his money on that. And by the time December came, we still didn't have any suite finished, but he had spent a whole bunch of money on renovations, or not renovations, demolitions. And I spent a whole bunch of money on materials, and like I didn't have a suite even complete yet. And it wasn't until I think it was March that we actually had a suite that was rentable, that was complete and rentable. I mean, that was like almost 6 months later.
I'm doing the math too.
Yeah, we had to change the complete program back in December from, originally we were going to have this building done in about 6 months. That was our original renovation plan, to have everything done in 6 months. And man, it took way longer than that.
Well, that's unheard of. You mean you had a renovation plan that went off budget and the timing wasn't working out? I don't know, man. You're probably the only one that's ever happened to.
Yeah. So, I mean, looking back, now I can laugh, but at the time, man, you're going, what the hell's going on?
Well, you're 7 months you're 7 months into the renovation, and that's what it took to. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's when the first suites were done, was 7 months in, and that wasn't all of them. That was just some of them on the third floor.
Yeah, and that was just some on the third floor, and then he still had to do the second and first floor, and he ended up more or less doing a lot of the work himself. Plus, maybe he had a helper. So I mean, the crew shrunk significantly. So and the pace of completion, got quite a bit longer, just because he started off with such a big crew. He didn't have enough. I guess that was his plan, but the crew wasn't efficient enough to keep things going.
Really?
So yeah, so he was watching his cash flow and things like that, and that kind of evaporated on his side. So we had to adjust.
And it sounds like he was a fairly decent adjustable person, which is really good because, as you said, difficult to find people to go to Swan Hills or that are in Swan Hills. So if you're not able to work it out with this guy, then you've even got more trouble. So was he a decent sort, this contractor?
Yeah, oh yeah, like he was he's a very good guy. Like, he's willing to work with me in terms of and I was willing to work with him as well, to make things a win-win again. I knew that I had paid him probably a bit of cash, to do the renovations, and the things weren't going as planned, really, and so we had to adjust. And he was willing to stick it through to the end, and that's what really, I think, saved me as well. That I found a contractor that wasn't willing to walk away, because he could have easily left me in the lurch, and he was able to complete it, which I have really high regard for that.
Yeah, that would have been a disaster. So, folks, if you're taking on any kind of a renovation project, your most valuable asset there is a reliable contractor. And so I don't know if you knew he was reliable going in, but if anybody's ever doing anything about getting a renovation or any building done, really checking references and making sure, as much as you can, that someone is reliable is really ultra important. Would you say that's right, Wayne? You just playing with your pen there, or are you looking for a?
That is, I am agreeing. Okay. I concur.
Tapping it.
I'm loving this, and we keep laughing. We keep laughing because we know that, and Chris and Barry, I mean, that some of the greatest deals that we've had are probably some of our hardest deals. And I always admire, I ask, how many times did you almost quit? It's the fact that you were tenacious and that you stuck with it, which I'm assuming, I haven't heard the end of the story yet. I'm assuming it turned out to be a really good deal.
Well, this is really a good point.
Otherwise, it's going to be a horrible story.
Well, this is a good point where you're like the spring afterwards. Do you still feel like you gave her too much cash? Did you overpay? 20 grand plus the mortgage. I'm not sure if it's a deal yet.
Yeah. Well, I think I got a good deal, but it was everything else after the initial close that I had to deal with.
I bought a building around the same time, and it was not as hard, but 2018 was a tough time for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we're into 2019. We're sort of 8 months in, and you must have had a suite or two finished somewhere along the line and moved the tenant in. How did
Yeah.
that?
So I actually got my first tenant in. I had to look back, and it wasn't until June 2019. So that was a long haul to get one tenant in, and it was for a furnished suite. So I had to buy a bunch of furniture as well, and I had to get my maintenance guy to find some furniture from in Swan Hills to help create this furnished suite. So yeah. So I mean, it was fantastic that I got my first tenant, but that's only one. And the original two tenants, one of them, I think he moved back to Newfoundland, so I lost him. And then the other tenant, I actually had to evict. I had to go to what do you call that? CDRS.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Only two tenants, and you got to punt one.
Yes.
One moves, and
Exactly,
one you
right?
have to punt.
Exactly.
We had
right?
some suspicions about that guy. I think it was like that. They've always got that fleece blanket on the bed with the wolf on it. And I think there were 3 people day drinking the day we toured it the first time. I mean, a rent check's a rent check, but I wasn't surprised that one person went sideways.
So he actually came to me initially when I first bought the building and say, "Hey, can I help you manage the building?" So
No. Thank you very much for your kind offer.
yeah.
Well, we're starting to put tenants in. It's June 2019. You put your first tenant in. Tell us about the next bit as we move into winter.
Yeah.
The
So
year.
so the renovation's ongoing, you know, at a constant pace, but it's relatively slow. And then January 2020 hits, where we get pretty much winter, and you know we're getting the minus 30s and wind chills and minus 35s, and all of a sudden the heating system stops. You know, so we have a whole bunch of suites that aren't getting heat for whatever reason, and you know, like again, you know, like holy cow, am I gonna have to lose this building because of freezing? You know, like that was crazy. So I had my maintenance guy go out and buy a whole bunch of electric heaters, and we didn't actually energize all of the suites because you know I didn't want to pay power for you know the suites that we weren't using. So we you know in lots of cases we were you know probably overloading our electrical circuits by the heaters. So you know,
and long extension cords
exactly. So,
down the hall.
yeah, I mean, we had tenants where they weren't getting heat, and they were complaining and stuff like that, and we were, you know, like what there wasn't much that we could do, you know, like I think I hired a mechanical guy to come out and have a look at it, and even then, you know, there wasn't a lot that they could do.
But I mean, sooner or later, you have to solve this heating problem. In the end, what was the answer to, or in the end, what was the reason that the heat wasn't there, and how did you solve that?
Well, yeah. So the heating system. I mean, I think there was just a lot of gunk in the water, which needed to get cleaned out. And so I hired a mechanical guy from Whitecourt. He came up and I asked him, well, let's put in glycol, so that we could at least, like glycol, which is antifreeze, at least protect the heating pipes from freezing, you know, and make sure that it's flowing. So I did that in the, you know, let me think, in September 2020, and you know that helped. And then he also put in a filter system to make sure that the fluid's clean and you can see whether or not it gets dirty and stuff like that. So, you know, I was investing quite a bit of money, still investing money into the building that I really didn't know how much, you know, when it was going to end.
So that was an ongoing problem right from square one. But of course, you're doing your first multi. This is a boiler system with, you know, with that kind of heating. If if you were, if you were starting again with the knowledge you have now, what would you do with the heating right at the beginning, now that you know a bit more about how these systems work?
Yeah. Well, I definitely put in glycol. Make sure the heating system's cleaned out. Put in glycol. Put in the filters. Just make sure all the air valves are checked and or replaced. The air release valves. Because actually, I had one of the air release valves fail. Like it's a $10 valve, and it failed in one of the suites that was already renovated up on the third floor. So there was water spewing everywhere from the third
Darn.
floor, a renovated suite, dripping down onto a second floor renovated suite, and into the first floor, which we had not renovated yet. So
bonus.
yeah. So I mean, the excitement never ends, right?
Chris has got to head out here. We just wanted to say thank you for coming in and
Gary, we'll go for a beer soon so I can hear the rest of the story, because I feel like I definitely owe you one at this stage of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
great.
more to it, Chris. Well, thanks for showing up. That's fun.
No
We'll
worries.
make sure
Thanks
you
for
hear the
having me,
rest.
guys.
All right.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I mean, the air release valve was a $10 item.
Yeah.
And
really,
yeah, and that failed, which costed me thousands to fix.
Yeah. So if you're going to be in a very cold weather situation, so Swan Hills is 2.5 hours north of Edmonton. Edmonton is the world's largest, most northerly city already, and then you got to drive another like hundreds of kilometers north. So folks, if you're ever going to be involved in that, you got to make sure about heating and hire great mechanical guys to give your system a going over. And yeah, it's probably going to cost you some money, just like it cost Gary a few times, not just once, a few times. Well, let's get back on the tenant side of things. I think we're into kind of the middle April, May of 2020. You've had one tenant in. I think you've got other suites renovated. Tell us more.
Yeah. So by March 2020, 15 months after we started, the renovations are substantially complete. So all of the suites are done on the third, second, and first floors. And then it was in April 2020 where we had the air release valve fail, which flooded the third and second floors. And then in April, May 2020, I've eventually arranged to get 5 suites rented from the hazardous waste treatment center operator. Nice. And yeah, so that was a really nice feeling to get that many suites rented all at once. And I bet I think even in 2019 I was telling them, hey, I'm gonna have this building renovated and ready to rent, and it's taken me probably over a year since I first talked to them and said, hey, I'm gonna have this building ready to rent. So eventually came around. Yeah, exactly, right.
Well, that's good. So that's a big industrial operation. They have lots of people working there. They pay their guys pretty well. If they're going to convince people to come and live in Swan Hills, they need better accommodation. So you were probably an attractive possibility for helping out there.
Exactly. Well, I think a couple of the suites were for some of the workers that come from Edmonton and maybe some of the so I think they have a couple people that come in from Edmonton and stay for a few days or a week, and then they actually have some suites that they use for some of their summer students, also some of their new employees when they come and get hired. So I think sometimes they give them, a few months in the suites, and then after a couple months, then they have to find their own accommodations.
Well, we're now into sort of late summer, early fall of 2020. Things are all renovated. You got the operator there who's filling units for you. So you're all full up at this point?
Well, yeah. So through June and September, I eventually find that I have 9 suites occupied. And then later on, I find that the operator for that waste treatment center gives me notice that they only need 2 suites. So I'm really scrambling. So that they're giving me 3 suites back, basically. So now I'm really scrambling in terms of, well, I've only got 9 suites minus 3, so I'm gonna have 6 suites occupied, and I'm going, what the heck? I've got to do something, right?
Yeah, 6 of 24.
Yeah, 6 out of 24. So
And you're 2 years into this property now.
yeah, exactly.
Oh man.
It's a long
I'm
haul.
sorry. I'm sorry.
It
boy.
becomes very emotional, right? And so I was thinking I got to do something. So I ended up
Yeah.
lowering my rental prices, and I went aggressively marketing on Facebook, on Zumper, on Kijiji, contacting local companies around, and that was just something that I needed to do. Just try to get some income to cover
Right.
the expenses, right? Because the renovations have been going so long, and now our suites are finished. Now I gotta fill it, and even if I have to lower the rent, it's better to have it filled with somebody in there paying
Yeah.
something than to have nothing.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I lowered the prices, and now things are really good, actually. Um, February was my best month, where I had 20 suites out of 24 occupied, and actually 3 of the suites I can't, like, they still have to get fixed. I didn't fix those suites yet because I had all of these other suites that were more or less empty. So I didn't want to put in more money into those suites. I needed to get the existing suites filled so I could increase my income, stabilize the building, and go for refinancing. So February, like I say, was my best month so far with 20 suites occupied, and that was awesome. In terms of being able to go from 2 to 20, and now I actually yeah, in February I had to turn people away because I didn't have enough of the suites that they were looking for, which was amazing.
That is amazing. I mean, because you have the operator turning suites back to you. You've got 6 of 24 rented, but now but aggressive marketing gets you to the point where you have more applicants for suites than you have suites.
Yeah.
More qualified applicants. Is that really it?
Exactly. And the funny thing is, like, I never expected people to move from Edmonton to Swan Hills
Oh,
on a long-term basis.
well, really?
Yeah.
Part of what we hear about COVID is people are looking to get to smaller centers, get out of town.
I mean, it could be related to that, or it could be related to the pricing. Like, like my 1-bedroom suite rents for $550 a month.
Renovated.
Yeah, renovated. Right. I mean, it's a pretty good deal for people, and yeah, and it's brand new. I mean, more or less brand new, but in Swan Hills, I mean, you can find a lot of other buildings in there, but they're not going to be as updated,
No.
right? So, yeah.
Wow. Now, before we get into summarizing here, I want to do some summarizing on the numbers and the timing, which will kind of take us to the end of today's Monday main event. Here's a question for you. You said near the beginning that there are other buildings in Swan Hills that are kind of mothballed. They're shut. They're not rented. They're just have enough heat on to stop them from freezing. I'm guessing there are other opportunities there now. have you considered whether or not you're going to go bang on the door of whoever owns those buildings and go, so what if I took over all your expenses? Or is one building enough for you in Swan Hill?
Well, you know, the funny thing was, I was talking with a guy who was interested in buying a building up in Swan Hills. So we were talking about, okay, what's the economy like and this and that. And he wasn't familiar with Swan Hills and whatnot. But what I suggested to him was that, hey, why don't we, him and I, buy the building together? And I can operate it, and I know the town, I know the tenants, and you know, we could have a joint venture together. So, you know, that would be a win-win for both of us.
That would be. Well, I got to say, I admire you, Gary, for going through what an exercise in perseverance and over a long period of time. But in the end, you get a pretty good result. So let's talk about the numbers. Let's talk about the
Sure.
summary.
Okay.
I want to hear the math. I want to hear this. I want to see how it ends.
Let's start out with what did you pay and what was your down payment, and just follow the numbers through.
Yeah. So I paid $270,000 for it. And the seller had financing of $250,000. So I put in $20,000 as a down payment. The renovations came in at $375,000, and there were some investors and stuff like that, which we paid $30,000. So in total, the purchase, the rental, and the investor costs came to $675,000.
75. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So based on my NOI right now, which I'm projecting to be about $96,000 a year, and a cap rate of, let's say, 9.5.
Nice.
Yeah. So we're estimating the building value at $1 million right now, which is, yeah. So that's a huge increase of value by $355,000.
Yeah, after all the money. Wow. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
And then the mortgage, I'm looking at getting a 75% loan to value on it. So $750,000 for the mortgage, which will repay all of the purchase, the renovation costs, the investors of $675,000, and there's going to be $75,000 remaining afterwards. And you know, that's really going to pay some of the three remaining suites that have to get fixed, and then pay a little bit to myself as well. So
yeah,
that's $75,000 in hand, right?
In hand, yeah, exactly.
After you paid off all the debts.
Exactly.
So that's what they call a burr, like a really, really good burr.
Exactly. So basically, I'm owning the building with no money invested in it.
Yep.
Right. So I get $75,000 back, and the net cash flow on this is going to be about $55,000 a year after paying all my expenses, all my mortgage payments. $55,000 a year.
Wow. Well, that's absolutely outstanding. So before we get into just a summary of all the things that you fix from various people's perspectives, I just have to say I am in total awe that you took on a project of this size. So it's your first multi.
Yeah.
It's a long way from Edmonton, in a place you don't know, with lots of risk. But you know, the numbers worked out, and well, I mean, you first heard of it in 2017, didn't you? And we're in 2021 now, but it's about 3 years of getting it to where it is now, but totally worth it in the end, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. It was, it was a lot of work, a lot of emotional up and downs. What I would say is that knowing what my goals are was a huge factor in making sure that this building was going to work out the way it is.
Yeah, Gary, folks, Gary said that at the beginning. He was spinning his wheels a little bit. An engineer, been in real estate for a long time, had a bunch of successes, but a bit of wheel spinning until he worked with his real estate coach and his mindset coach to really sort out and get clear on what his goals were. You don't know where you're going. How are you going to get there?
Mhm.
So that was a key success factor to I think give you the confidence to plug ahead, because if you could do what the plan was, it would help you reach your goals. So
Yeah,
that was good.
exactly.
And
I mean,
I'm assuming that contributed to your perseverance as well.
oh, absolutely. You know, back when I was looking at the deal, it was really taking a leap of faith into what I'm doing, because I didn't have all the answers, right? And it was really going down that path of becoming somebody else, or becoming a bigger person. So
Mhm.
Just the real you coming out, Gary. That's
Yeah.
all that was.
exactly.
Well, listen, I'm just going to summarize. You said what the you said really what the conclusions is coming apart from this, or coming away from this. So this is in Gary's own words. He describes this, and I agree, as a win-win-win. So it was a seller win because this elderly widow lady, using her pension, was able to stop the bleeding in her life and get rid of a huge problem for her. Can you imagine how hard that must have been on her? She just didn't know what to do, and she's using her pension, and oh my goodness. So for her, it was great. Stopped the bleeding, got rid of her problem. For Gary, it was a big win because now he owns a really beautiful renovated building, and he's into it for no money down. And his net worth has gone up. His cash flow is $55,000, and he's confident enough. And I was kind of surprised to hear this. Confident enough that he could talk to somebody else about doing another project in Swan Hills. So that is good, because this could have gone sideways in so many ways, and Gary never would have looked or talked about Swan Hills ever again. Now he's ready to do another project. So that was good, and it was a win for the contractor that this turned out to be his biggest project to date. Got a good relationship with Gary, and he learned a lot, and then probably improved his ability to do future projects. So it was a win-win-win for the seller, for Gary as buyer, and also for the contractor.
Mhm.
What a learning experience! Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I
So
mean,
much in there.
it was a fantastic opportunity, and actually, this has really built up my confidence. And right now, I'm looking at this a 47 unit building here in Edmonton that we're looking to take over and renovate. So.
Well, that sounds like a very tough project, Gary. I don't know if you should do that one.
Gary, we went a little over a lot of time that we had today, but there was a significant amount of questions. I'm wondering if it's possible. Are you able to head back there tonight into the comments section and answer some of those questions that people are asking?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure,
That'd be
absolutely.
great.
Wow, well, that would be really good. It's such a great story. So Gary, thank you very much for coming on, and also putting the effort in to give me this summary, because it was so helpful to lead us through the twists and turns and ups and downs, and kept it all pretty focused. There was a lot to talk about, and we got it all in. So thank you very much for showing up and helping us out. We do appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome. I had a fantastic time. This was so cool.
That was fun.
Thanks.
Wayne, as always, you're great.
Thanks. You are
to
too.
Hillier principal. Yes, principal. We'll repeat that in future events.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to say goodnight, everybody. It's our niece Adriana's 18th birthday today. A little girl we're heavily involved in. She's turning 18 today on the Ides of March, and we're going to take her out for a fancy dinner because that's what she wants to do. So, good night, everyone. Thanks again, Gary.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.